All right, heart of the matter. Thanks everyone for joining me again for another episode this week. Please go ahead, subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as our podcast channels on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and click that 5-star, please. That 5-star rating on Apple, it goes a long way to help fight the algorithm here on the podcast. And once again, today I'm joined by my buddy, film partner from Lifers, Mr. Tanner Poppitt. Man, Tanner, man, I'm definitely I would say not much more, but definitely a bit more what's the word? I'm not as exhausted today as I was on the last episode. No monopoly. I think I got all the spelling right on today's titles and everything, man. But how you doing, bud? How's everything going?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Just be about to begin the next chapter of my journey here, which everybody will see soon. I can guarantee that. And yeah, man, I have a couple announcements very soon. I may do some stuff as terms of what we're doing here, but on my own program. So I'll get more into that at another venture. But I'm doing really well, man. I hope you're doing well too. And thanks again, as always, for having me on. It's always a real thrill for me to be a part of this.
So, today we're going to piggyback kind of on that episode that we did last time, and when we were chatting, you mentioned, an interview that you had done with the gentleman by the name of Matt Bacon. So, yeah, I know Matt a little bit myself. I actually had hired Matt. He had his company called Dropout Media. It was a marketing media thing he was doing. I don't think he's still around, but I used him, 5-6 years ago when me and Bob were restarting Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast. We used Dropout for, just to help kind of promote, at the time, remember, it was, the podcast stuff was all new. So I really didn't know how to promote or market a podcast, all that. So we used his services. And also, I remember the website, Matt helped me out with a buddy of his that actually helped do a website for me as well. Matt's a nice guy, service-wise with marketing, with the Dropout. Again, I'm not saying it's all him. I didn't really do my part as much, but I don't think that was a great experience I had with him. But Matt's a real nice guy. And I remember you did an interview. I remember that interview you did with him, actually, because I remember you sent it to me to check out before I think you even posted. And I told you, I thought it was one of the best interviews I had heard you do. And I thought it was great. The input, the questions you asked, and the input that Matt gave, I thought was really good. Really good. I mean, it's also very, I should say, it was, at that time, that was during the pandemic, you interviewed him. And I remember I liked it because it was very informative about what was going on in the music business. We were talking last episode about gatekeeping. Okay. And so there was a lot of information in that he had shared, which would kind of explain, I guess, why we see a lot of gatekeeping these days in the underground, rock and metal scene. And it's funny because, like you said, after you mentioned him, I went back and re-listened to that episode. And what struck me is just 4.5 years ago, that thing was done. And it's everything that he mentioned in there and that you guys talked about and questions you asked, everything, and even your input that you gave from some of, the stuff that you wanted to share. It's still absolutely relevant today. And so I wanted to really kind of dig into it because, again, I want to kind of go through it because, like I said, there's just a lot to chew on in there and a lot that is still relevant. Now, like I said, I remember you did that interview. Do you remember? I mean, like I said, it's 4.5 years ago. I know we're all men now and stuff. So I know that was an interview that I remember. I thought you kind of weren't sure if it was, really that great or not. I always told you it really was. What do you remember of that interview you did with Matt?
Well, yeah, that was like 4 or 5 years ago. You said 4.5 years ago. I haven't heard it since then. So
Okay.
what I do remember is I was frustrated with, like, because I felt like I wasn't getting the information that I wanted to get for that specific episode, and it's always frustrating as a host if, like, I'm not there, I'm trying to steer it into like one way and it's going a different way, and I just
Mhm.
at one point I have to let it go now. But at that time, I was just very frustrated with it. So I was like, "Do I even
Mm,
release this?" And that's why I sent
mm,
it to you, because I really value your opinion. And you're like, "No, this is great. Like, this is you need to let the world hear this." But yeah, it's been a while for me. I'm sure, like, as you're mentioning points, I'm gonna be like, "Oh yeah, that happened. Oh yeah, I remember that." So it's gonna be one of those kind of
mm.
dealios, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you pulled out of it, and then like see what is still relevant. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing what you got.
Mhm, sure, man. Well, Matt also just quickly, he did, he's done marketing. He worked with a lot of labels. He worked with Ripple, big stoner rock, doom metal label out of here, the Bay Area here, and a lot of other labels too, like some black metal labels, I believe, and some extreme metal labels. He's been, like I say, he's been in business for a while. He definitely knows his stuff, and he's also a big influencer, with his bacon bits. That's kind of how he made his name. And where he kind of gives, basically gives a lot of the information you guys talked about, and he brought to Poppitt's Corner in that episode is stuff that he kind of talks about in the bacon bits. I don't know if he's still doing it. I did see he's doing another podcast recently where he's still talking music business stuff. So I'm gonna probably have to go check out some of that stuff. But what so anyway, Matt, like I said, he's been in the business, underground music, for a while. He's a name that people are very familiar with. Now, in the interview you do with him, because we talked about gatekeeping, right? That was the thing we were talking about in the last episode. And all this, why is all there's so much gatekeeping? And what happened to just everything more revolving around the artist and the music itself instead of all this other stuff. And so I think really, the thing is, listening back to that interview, I mean, pretty much I got the answers of why, and I'll give Matt credit because, like I said, that was 4.5 to 5 years ago, but it's still relevant today. So, I mean, one of the things, obviously, why things are different the way they are now than they used to be. Okay, no surprise here, social media, right? One of the things that he talks about, he says that you really have to engage with the scene, and what he's talking about is, of course, you want to engage, when you're at shows and so forth, but it's really social media. These days it's interesting because things start really on social media, and then they go physical when you meet people physically at a show or somewhere. Where in the past, it was one of those, you would go somewhere, you'd then meet them, and then it would be maybe through all other types of media, whether it's an email or a phone call or, other types of communication, I should say. Um, so one of the things he talked about when you guys were, you were basically asking him about really, as a band, I mean, how do you break through and get noticed? And what he says obviously is one of the big things is, not so much you can hire a PR firm, right, to do some stuff, but it's not enough. You have to engage with the scene via social media. I mean, how can you do that? Because, because we said, here's what happens, right? You engage on some posts, right? He basically says you go on there, you look out for labels and musicians, artists, or just people that you know in the scene that can help, influencers or what have you. And you start engaging on some of their posts, answering some of their questions, or just saying you like certain things, blah, 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 like their posts. It could be, I mean, again, it's that's the start, right? So I think the first thing you have to do, obviously, and we know this, is it's all about social media. I mean, number one, which is, the problem with that, as we know, is not everyone's great with social media, right? We know how to do it, but it's like, and I have a lot of problems with that, but that's one thing is the social media. What's your, I mean, like I said, I want to get you involved here. I don't want to just be talking the whole time, but when it comes to social media, I know that's something that for you was a challenge. It's something that's a challenge for me as well. It's something I've definitely got to, force myself to do. It's not something I really want to do, but it's just sort of like, you have to do it or you're left out kind of thing. No one's going to notice you and blah, blah, blah. I know, like I said, same for you. I know that's been sort of a challenge for you as well over the years, correct? Especially when you had Madras going.
Oh, yeah, I was consuming my life, though, is the problem. So I was on it, like,
Mhm.
24/7, posting and posting and posting. So, Yeah, and it's you have to post at certain times in order to, to trick the algorithm into pushing it into people's kind of faces and whatnot. And um, there was a moment too where you had to, go out to the shows, not just post on social media, but you actually had to go out and like engage with like actual people, and it's not just social media. It's kind of like a,
Mhm.
a yin to the yang or whatever. You have to do both.
It's a hybrid of
And
it, yeah, mhm.
yeah, and I'm curious to know, some certain points that he's making, how social media has changed just from even some of the points he mentioned, because the algorithm has changed probably since then. And I'm sure that bands have to do it somewhat in the same way as 4 or 5 years ago. Now
Mhm.
I'm just be curious how it's changed though from then, even just
Well, I mean
yeah.
see, my problem is because one of the things he says, one of the first things he says is you have to engage, and he was saying like it's easy, just go on there and be yourself and act like you normally would. But see, there's a problem with that. I think, look, there are some people that are really good, right? They make it a point, and they might be just natural. They're better, when it comes to writing text. Now, the problem when you're engaging, especially in a community that you're just starting to or a page or group that you're just starting to kind of engage with, right? I'll just use an example that I went through. Okay, in the underground heavy rock scene, one of the things I was a part of for a while, and I really respect what this thing is about. It's called the Doom Charts, and basically, it's just a bunch of journalists across the globe, journalists and just influencers and podcasters, what have you, that are in we get sent tons of press releases with all these bands and their albums and stuff, and every month we would you know rate our top albums of the month. And now and basically it tried to make it mostly the underground bands, not so much any mainstream bands. Anytime there's a mainstream band that got reviewed or got onto the list, a lot of people were pissed off, so they wanted to make it more of an underground thing. So basically, every month you get a ton of these press releases. I mean, like a gazillion of them. You find some bands you like, and then you'd rank them, and then they would, put them all together. They had like sort of a point system, and then they put out the chart, and it's really good. It's just a good, just I guess reference point, for underground music and for bands that are starting out that have nowhere to go. It's a cool thing, right? So when I joined up for this thing, I mean, the guy who runs it too, Jupe Conrad, by the way, great guy. He's probably the one guy that pushed the lifers for us, man, more than anybody. He's from the Netherlands. He's the guy that runs it. He's an awesome dude. Shout out to Jupe. So I just it's a really cool thing to do charts. But the problem, like for instance, someone like me, when I was joining in, okay, obviously no one knows who I am. He introduces me who I am. Now I also came in there like most of these, as I was saying, most of these are just kind of just a man or woman type of person, between the United States and Europe, who just review albums mostly. They have a blog and they review albums and do basically reviews. Okay, so me joining it was like, oh, I've worked at a bunch of labels, have my own label, yada yada yada, right? All the experience I've had in the business. I haven't had like an immense amount. I have this amazingly successful. I haven't been amazingly successful in the music business, but because I've had a lot of work experience, I think sometimes, a little bit it was kind of like, what's this guy doing here? Kind of, it's not really for that, right? These are just for the average Joe type of person who likes music, just wants to review stuff. So right away, I'm coming in, okay? So I can engage. Of course, I could sit there and say, "Yeah, I love that band. Oh, this sounds great." Blah blah blah, right? And I just show my name and face. I think that's for one, what he's saying. I think is what you've got to do, right? You just get in there. You be nice to people in there. Maybe I guess maybe that's the thing too, though. There's a lot of things, right? When you engage, I might have a sense of humor that some people might not get. And if I want to be a little more personable, and text doesn't have feelings. So I think sometimes when he said, you got to go in there and be and just it isn't that hard. I think it is hard, and I think that is the problem too. If it was that easy, I think you'd see a much more of a cohesive community. which is a word that will always kind of go like this here and there with that word community, than we see. I mean, so what talk about for you? What did when you were engaging, over the years, whether it was your podcast or your band, what was probably the biggest challenge you had when it came to just engaging in general, just commenting, liking things, and so forth?
Well, yeah, for me, it was like, how am I gonna get I don't even like to use the term product, but how am I gonna get the music out there? Because it's it's so different now than when I was doing social media. You have to think about how
Mhm,
PR has changed since then. Um,
mhm,
in fact, I don't even know in terms of what it is or how it's changed in terms of PR because I'm not on social media. So you would be the perfect guy to ask on how
mhm,
PR has essentially changed even in the last 5 years, and that's probably a huge factor into how bands could promote themselves differently or do promote themselves differently now compared to then. But I also have to say that, like, it was difficult for us because there's so many bands out there, and
mhm,
back then too, everybody was doing their own podcasts and whatnot. So you had this influx of like all these like legacy dudes doing podcasts, only having on their own legacy buddies and whatnot. So
mhm.
the whole podcasting landscape changed significantly because everybody was at home, and then obviously once they started to tour, and then everything has changed because of that as well. And I think for me, the hardest part was finding the audience that was going to click with whatever I was posting, because there's so many bands, and it's like, yeah, for us, we're very niche. We're not like a mainstream. You would never hear us on like K Rock or like a I wouldn't even say like a serious. I think we wouldn't even fit in with like a serious, like liquid metal
Mhm.
type stuff. We're
Sure.
so underground. So it's a matter of finding the right audience that's gonna like your music. And because of the influx of so many bands and so many podcasts, it was hard
S
to navigate that
so
landscape.
in terms of the engagement, though, like you said, you weren't necessarily going out there posting on people's pages, right? Or and like other musicians or labels or something, right? Yeah, okay.
No,
So,
I
yeah, okay. And I believe and he is completely completely correct about that, and that is still going on today. Now, it depends on which, social media platform you're talking about as well. When he's talking about there's definitely a more of a I would say personally more of a Facebook thing that he's mentioning in terms of engaging in a community, engaging with your fan base community, within the community online. I mean, yes, you could do that also, of course, on Instagram, which I think is it's a less maybe it's not as what's the word? Facebook, you have these groups. It just seems like it's a little bit tighter with the communication where Instagram just feels like there's not necessarily this, as big of a community. Maybe just because I don't really, comment as much on Instagram that I, had done on Facebook. Like I've been, like I said, I've been with the Doom charts with some of these groups on the heavy rock scene. I was definitely kind of involved in that for a little while. I never, like I said, I never really felt, comfortable with it because, for one, the problem is, again, getting back to when he says, it's really not that hard. You just simply go in there and buy. It is hard because, to me, listen, I'm the type of person where I mean, yeah, I could talk to you a little bit online, but I don't really, I can't really trust or whatever, get to really know somebody unless I meet them in person, right? Sure, it could start online. Hey, I mean, like, just texting or whatever, commenting, I should say. Then it might lead to, well, okay, maybe doing a podcast with someone like that. Then at least with this, right, you get to see that person, you get to, see their body language, all that good stuff, right? And then it's like, okay, hey, maybe we should get together for a lunch or a beer one day or something like that, right? That's kind of how I would say the normal means of communication work in just about anything, right? So here now you're telling people, no, you got to, go in there and impress people just by your text and rhetoric through text via social media, which is extremely difficult. Now, okay, it's also, some people, like I said, aren't good with their words. Some people take text out of I mean, text have no feelings, has no emotions. So something might seem. I'll just give a great example real quick. Okay, one of these groups in that heavy rock scene, there was a thing about the band, this big thing about the band Castle, right? You know, they are at all Castle, right?
I've heard the
Okay.
name, yes.
All right. Well, they're starting to really blow up pretty big. Okay. Now they have a female singer. Okay. Attractive female singer. Her dad, I believe, is a guitar. You know, is a guitarist that had played with a bunch of '80s bands. I forget off the top of my head who he played with, but it was Cyndi Lauper. I believe he was a guitarist with Cyndi Lauper, a bunch of others, right? So they've kind of blown up this band eh, pretty fast. I mean, they've definitely paid their dues a little bit, in the underground scene in New York and Brooklyn, but they've kind of, they took off. I mean, they have some stage presence, so there's money invested in them. They put out an album, and they're kind of like a lot of these bands these days. They're pretty polarizing. People usually tend to either love them or they're just like, you know what, they're an industry plant type of band. A lot of people are accusing them of being an industry plant because of the connections and because of a female singer, so forth, right? Or attractive female singer, I should say. So some guy kind of made a post about that. How he just kind of thinks that they're a plant in this group, and this guy got so destroyed because of that
Ratioed into oblivion.
into oblivion. And then eventually, and the guy who runs a page, I'm not going to get into who does it, blah, blah. The guy who runs a page, who I do respect, he's a very respectable person in the scene. In the beginning, they were calling for this guy to be canceled, pretty much. They kick him out of the group just for making that his opinion. He said no, and I gave him credit for holding firm on it and made a good post about it. But it got so bad that, like most, he capitulated and kicked the guy out. Now, again, there's a great example of some guy just coming in this group, guy that people kind of know within this world, in that world. He wasn't like he was a nobody. And he just had his opinion, just said, look, I think they're a plant. I don't, whatever it may be. All you had to do was say, yeah, I totally disagree. I think they're a great band. I think they've earned it, blah, blah, blah. But no, it turned into, he's sexist, because he's a male and he's going off about a female. So again, just the things that we typically see. So to me, but Matt is right. Like, this is, when I look at the quote unquote communities in social media, which then sort of translate into real life and a lot of these scenes, he's right. I mean, if you're not engaging, if you're not a band that's engaging, I've seen bands that, to be quite honest, I don't think they're very good. I've heard their band, but because they were so engaging and would comment on things and compliment people and blah, 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 and they played the basically networking game via social media, they had been added to a lot of these shows.
Well, and that happened like to us until I had a difference of
The
opinion,
festivals.
you know.
Exactly.
So
Mhm.
it's almost like, yeah, once you say something that goes against the grain on anything, you're kicked out of the club.
Well,
You're
again,
out.
then there's the
You're
group
out of the
thing, there's
village.
the club, the group think, mentality where it's everywhere, but it emanates and I think starts and germinates from social media.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
because everybody has a voice now, even though their voice
exact.
doesn't matter anyways
And
in the
some
grand
shouldn't
scheme.
have a voice, as we think. Exactly.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Um,
yeah, but in the grand scheme of things, it does nothing matters, you know?
yeah, but
Not
yeah,
not
just to wrap up, yeah, yeah, just to wrap up that point. So for for Matt going out there, he's saying just to talk to people like a normal human being, but without but with but I mean with normal human beings, again, there's body language, real language, things that can't be taken out of context, that can be cleared up. You can't talk to people as a normal human being online like you can do it in real life.
no,
So
because
I
you can
think
get punched in the mouth if you know what
well,
I mean?
exactly, giving the example I was giving to you before, exactly. So again, it's a virtual reality. It's not a reality reality, a physical reality. So right there, that's of course a major problem, right? And I think we all know that that's social media has been obviously a major problem, but that's a major problem. Now the other thing he says is like he says to be cool. Well, how could you be? My thing is, how do you be cool online? I mean, what, to show some pictures of yourself? But isn't that being kind of narcissistic and selfish? I mean, it's funny. He said to be funny. Well, not everybody's funny. I'm not. I don't consider myself funny. I mean, I have a thing or two here. There, I might say it's funny, but no one would be like, "Oh, Matt, man, he's a funny dude." You know, not at all. So, all right, if it's going to be cool and funny, I mean, I guess right there, maybe that's why guys like us failed with it, right? You know what I mean? I don't know, or just didn't get. But again, so these you see that this is part of the whole conundrum. Obviously, those things right there. Okay, I mean, like I said, we can be informative and send nice messages, but you can't be cool until, I mean, my opinion, until you experience their personality in person. All right. And also, how many predators do we see online that sound cool and friendly, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
it's kind of
Oh
it's kind of creepy in a lot of ways too, if you ask me.
yeah, Matt,
Right?
you're hilarious. Just so you know, and
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah,
and
I'm a
I
comedian. I know.
you're absolutely right though, because you can't gauge social or someone on social media, because when you see that person in real life, how many documentaries and such have you seen where like these influencers are like posting fake, pictures or whatever of themselves, and in the real life they're miserable. So they're not. It's not even a good
Hmm.
representation or an accurate representation of their own life.
Hmm.
It's all a facade. So are you going to really believe in the facade? And I don't even. I wish there was a way to like never comment on things. You just can post and kind of like it, and that's it.
Well, I
But
mean, yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, listen, there's been a lot of connections in good ways. Obviously, that's been made online. I've met friends online. That's how me and you met,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So, we connected through that before we start, I helped you with your podcast, with the Poppitt's Corner, just a few little things here and there, two little things. And that's it. Next thing you know, we started chatting and boom. Next thing you know, here we are, 6 years later, right? And did a film together and all that stuff. So again, I'm not like, this isn't putting anything down about like social media. You can't, meet people, but that aren't credible or aren't good people, but or cool, I should say, aren't cool people. Or funny. But sorry, I had to throw it in there.
There
But I
you go.
mean, listen, I mean, again, everyone's got a different perception. Some people think, oh, people tend to spend a lot of time online are not really people who spend a lot of time talking to people offline, right? Again, it could be acting. So again, this is but he's right, absolutely 1,000% right that is really where it all starts and starts to branch off from. Okay, and he admits, and now listen, he admits now. A lot of this is very gatekeepy. I mean, he says in the interview, he even says, I admit, he's like, yeah, it is very gatekeepish, no doubt. But he was saying that knowing is where the community is where it pays off. Uh,
And I think what
but
he means is
unfortunately,
people in the club. I don't even think he means like the
well, that's why I
community.
don't like this when I say
I
community.
think it's
Exactly, is it?
a club,
But we're gonna be PC here. We'll just go with the community. But yes, it is the club because, and like I'm going to say exactly. But the communities, unfortunately, listen, every page has one of these group pages, they have someone who's or one or two or three people, right, who run the page. Okay. So sometimes if someone steps or goes off again on something that people don't agree with and there's all this pushback, well then those other people are going to go, hey, listen, we can't do that and blah blah blah. Again, it's the mob rules mentality when you've got these pages. And I'm not going to get too deep in this, but these communities tend to be one-sided, and we kind of know what we're talking about here. Okay. So if you're someone like ourselves who occasionally like to think, like occasionally, a lot of times, like to think a little outside of the group thing box in those communities, how is that going to pay off unless you do one or two things, right? You either keep quiet and just go along to get along. Don't respond if someone's got replies to something you don't agree with. You just got to be quiet, and you fake it pretty much, right? Now, in a real community, if we're all hanging out together, okay, and we're talking about something, and I disagree, we're gonna disagree. Now, we might not like each other, but we still have that whole other community. But everyone's like, yeah, but I like him though. He's cool. Yeah, I don't agree with him, but he's still cool. I think I like him. Again, this is how real communities function, not online communities. Online communities are completely its own thing. So you either go along with whoever's managing those pages and what they set the rules. And a lot of those people love to like set it like, oh, they're really in charge of something here. They really like have a power trip over it. I mean, like I said, I've experienced this. And then again, you either sit there, watch like I did with this guy getting kicked out because he expressed a different, belief in about a band. which I eventually then left it because I'm like, I'm not going to watch. I don't agree with that. There's no way I'm going to watch someone get booted out for just having a difference of opinion. Again, so basically, you've got to again, you got to go along to get along here. You just got to go along with the gatekeepers. It is very gatekeepy, but he admits that.
Well,
He does
and
say that
see,
that way.
like we can disagree in real life, and we could still be friends. So, like, I don't.
Yeah,
It's because we can hear the inflections in like our voices, and like
exactly. Body
online,
language,
I
and yeah.
can't tell. It's like you're
Hmm.
only going off punctuation and periods and commas and exclamation points and all caps and things like that in terms of how you type your words or whatever online. So it's a bad representation of when you disagree with someone online. It's just a bad representation of what that person actually means versus like what he's typing, because there's could be two completely different things here. I mean, how many
Hmm.
times have you had a disagreement with someone and like they were like that you couldn't tell if they were being like super mean about it or like trying just to give constructive criticism, whatever the case may be. But in real life, I mean, I can vouch for this right now. We have disagreements. We've had disagreements in real life, and like we
Sure.
managed to like still be buds after almost like 10 years. So,
Hmm.
and that's because of we can understand and explain more in person, and we can't just like type in a thing, hit enter, wait for that person to respond, and be like, oh, I know, it's just a whole like waste of time to keep going back and forth on like that stuff online. Whether when we
Hmm.
could just have a conversation and like everything gets blown, smoothed over in real life.
Exactly. Well, and again, you brought up a good thing before. What happens if you get in a little disagreement online? Again, once that starts to amp up your disagreement, automatically you just naturally as a human being you go on defense, right? And so you're kind of on defense, and you're reading that text now with a different outlook on it. You're not looking at it as it's a positive thing. You're like, well, what are they going to say now? Now, I've seen people online get in arguments and be fine and everything, right? But normally those are people that already know each other. It's very rare you'll see people, if they get into it online, that they become buds after that. It's just, again, because it's not real, it's virtual. So you see a big portion, as we're just talking about for the last half hour, a big portion of what makes up the behind the scenes stuff, or just the fabric of the socio, factors within the scene, is all through this, what we've been talking about, all through text on some box and some line or some page online. It's that is not just, I mean, it's not healthy. It just doesn't make for a good, foundation, a social foundation for creating a quote unquote community
When it's
within,
not accurate,
music.
it's not accurate.
And yep,
It's
good
not
point. It's
it's
not accurate.
inaccurate, like,
Yeah,
representation of that
exactly.
said community or that said individual. Because again, there's so many people too that fake it till you make it, and, like, they
Hmm.
don't really live in the Bahamas, but they're posting that, like, they're in the Bahamas all every single post. Like, there are a lot of those people kinda
Well,
stuff.
yeah. No, you're right. And I've seen a lot of times where, listen, everybody's cool. One, maybe two people come in, start stirring the pot. And what happens is it's like, and they do it because you're either got to go, okay, yeah, totally, I agree, or you just stay out of it. And then that's when the divide starts to happen. The fragmentation starts happening from that. I mean, that's the thing is, I know sometimes some of these groups will have like rules in these communities. Okay, you can't say blah, 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 whatever. But that's all it takes. And they didn't want to kick that person out. But now everyone knows this guy. And of course, there's other people who do agree and they'll go, yeah, and they'll chime right in. It's like I said, it's very high schoolish. It's a very juvenile thing. And so right there, just the basis of this discussion so far, you're seeing that that's the foundation, and that's already a recipe for disaster.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
It can't it
and
will
it's a
never
recipe for not being, and it's not inclusive. For a lot of people who are all about inclusivity, it's not inclusive. Okay, so again, you're basically saying this is what you got to do to be a part of this, and if you don't, see ya. That's not a community. Again, it's a club, as we've been talking
That's
about.
a
Okay,
clique. It's like a different cliques, different
exactly.
factions of things, a
Yeah,
cult. It's almost like
exactly.
cult-like
It
mentality.
is. No, it totally is, man. You nailed it. All right, so let's move on now. Okay, that's one of the things. Now, the other thing he talks about, because he's done, some A&R stuff too, some like, junior A&R stuff he talks about. Now he says, and this is something you were talking about on the last episode that you brought up. He says if he finds a band that he likes, okay, he reaches out to people who play shows with them in their area to see if they suck as people. So one of the first things he does, it's not about like, how serious are they as musicians? I mean, how many shows do they play locally? Do you see them out in the record stores? Do you see them in the tattoo shops? Blah blah. No, it's right away. It's about identity. It's about, do they suck as people? Not about the art. Okay, they suck as people. So again, the art now, the music itself is secondary. The identity is first. I mean, if the first thing you're looking to do when you now, don't get me wrong, like you said, look, I've had a label. You've obviously played shows with other bands and so forth. So everybody wants to play, especially if you're. Let's just go to the A&R piece, okay? Since I did A&R, okay. Yeah, definitely. You don't want to work with, of course, people who are tough to work with. Okay, um, and like I said, I didn't either. But if you gave me a band, and that I knew was so good musically, though, and that, look, if I just put together, an album for them, and I remember, because it's the business now. We're talking about music business, and as a label, that's my job, is to sell records. Okay, manufacture and sell records. If I'm a legit business, okay, to me, as long as that artist has his or her shit together, obviously is good with the fans, and they're drawing good crowds at their shows. That was historically, okay, how labels what they would look for when they're looking to sign bands. Okay. Now I understand what he's saying here when he says, and he talks about it, is because, look, there's no money in it. That's the problem right now, right? So if we're looking at a label, sure, back in the 70s and 80s, whether it's an independent label or a major, it's all about talent, right? Who's gonna make me some money? Because I'm a business, I need to make money. I want to sell records. What band is great musically? But again, they were focusing number one on the art and the music. That's what mattered. Okay. But now we're in a time where he's saying, as an A&R guy, my number one thing is, I want to find out if these people suck as individuals. Now, I don't think that's obviously a very good thing, and explains another reason why this thing is kind of not, it's going to be on life support until something changes.
Right. It's part of the gatekeeping. It's part of the gatekeeping.
Yes, of course.
And
Yep.
and it's difficult in terms of what, like, beliefs, and like spewing your beliefs, because that was worked on one side and not the other. That's a whole part of the gatekeeping aspect too, is where
Mhm.
you line up on the agenda aspect. And there are plenty of bands that have gotten away with it, and bands that are for a difference of opinion, shall we say, are definitely canceled. And that we've seen that time and time again. It's part of the gatekeeping. It's part of,
Yeah.
hey, these people suck because we don't align with their beliefs or whatever, which is a total travesty for the art.
No, it is, and that's the thing. Because back in time, right, what mattered most was straight up the musical talent. And listen, let's be honest, we just assumed that most of the musicians were not that cool. They weren't good people. That was the point of it, in a way. You almost expected that. And so when you got a cool musician, it was like, wow, all right, this guy's actually nice. But in a way, it kind of went hand in hand, right? I mean, I'm not saying I'm all for that. Yeah, I love that musicians are total a-holes back in the day. No. But what I'm saying is that it was secondary. If they were cool as people, that's just icing on the cake, right? But we're there to scout talent that people are going to enjoy, and they're going to touch people, you know. And so now it's essentially a popularity contest, and it's more about the person's beliefs and personality than how good they are at their art and craft. I
And
mean,
songwriting too,
exactly.
right?
What's I'm
And
saying
having good
at the
songs.
craft, exactly. What's the thing at the art? I mean, and he said, I'm going to hate myself. He said the question he asked himself is, am I going to hate myself if I sign these people? Well, my question is, if they're selling you records and they're drawing crowds and making you money, why are you going to hate yourself? Unless, look, I'm not saying you got to go and get a a whole bunch of a band of pedophiles or a group of racists that are admittedly racist. Of course, no, that's the whole. Let's. I mean, that's just so juvenile even to think that that's what any label or A&R scout's going to look at. Of course, if any A&R scout sees that, unless you work for a racist label that's wanting to promote that specifically, which I know back in the day there were those. I'm sure there probably still are. Um, but unless that's it, then no one's going to be down with that. So why would you hate yourself as a person? I mean, why would you hate yourself if you sign a musician or an artist or a band that's going to make you money? I mean, that's the whole point. It's a business. As you see, the business part, not just the art is secondary, but the business aspect is secondary or even third before the person's personality and beliefs.
Yeah, it's almost
Amazing.
like the agenda comes first and everything else
Well, it
is
does.
yeah.
Hmm.
It's interesting.
No.
It's like what Disney went through with their crappy products. They put
Mhm.
the agenda was first, not making money, and everything else was secondary. And you saw how
No.
that ended up.
Yeah, again, it's not about is it going to suck for me personally, or not about are metal and rock fans going to like the music. Now, right away, my thought was like, that's a very narcissistic freaking comment at its core. Now he admits, I give him that credit. Like I said, he's a nice guy. He admits that yes, that sounds very selfish, but that there isn't much pay, and that if you're a label taking a financial risk, right? I guess you don't. But again, that's backwards because you take the financial risk because the band is good and is going to sell, and people are going to be into them, and they're going to want to hear their music and buy their products. That's the risk you're taking. Yeah, I mean, then why take a risk at all? I wouldn't. I mean, listen, I get it. There's people, yeah, that have just money to burn, just want to be involved, and they're like, I just want to, have it's a hobby for a lot of these guys. I mean, it really is these days. It's a hobby. So I can understand if it's your hobby and you got just money to burn, and it's just a hobby. Yeah, of course, you're probably going to want to just work with people that you like because you're also trying to build friendships and relationships, right? But my thing is like this is just another big portion of why the music has been lacking, the development itself. There's obviously there's a whole nother discussion on artist development, but it's because people who are starting labels, A&R people, or people even working at some other labels, they're signing people based off things that have nothing to do with the music itself and the quality of it.
Yeah,
Crazy.
absolutely. I can't even add to that statement because it's so true. There's nothing
I mean,
more to add. The proof is in the
well,
pudding.
well, it is. I mean, and then why would you listen? Why would you have a label or do anything in music? As we all know, yes, there's no money. Okay, so and I guess this isn't his problem. This is just a problem in general. He's bringing it to light, and he's totally right. It's like because there's no money, and that's really the big thing here, man. Because there's no money in the industry to be made. Even if you sign someone very talented, right? There's not a lot of money, and usually, let's be honest, people who are talented, bands that are talented, in this day and age, you'll realize that very fast that you'll either start putting out your own stuff or you will, get connected to a decent label sooner than later, pretty much. But if you're just someone starting your label, I mean, that's the thing. You're not again. Everyone's doing what's beneficial to themselves. That's the bottom line. Nobody is doing anything for this quote unquote community because it's not one. If you look at all the machinations of this whole business and why it's done and why decisions are being made and who's making those and the reasons for them, it's all done for selfish reasons.
It
Everybody's out for self, including even the business people who could be making some money. They're not signing bands based off the music itself, which is the product, which to me is just, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, again, just listening to a lot of this stuff was so like mind blowing because this was 5 years ago and it's still happening today, if not worse.
and it's based on like an old school model. Like the
Mhm.
label signs you, the label puts in X amount of money, and the 360 deals and this, that, and the other. But it's not prolonging the genre. It's not
Mhm.
who did this really correctly. And again, I'm just using an analogy here, and I've said this in the past, and I will keep reiterating it, is wrestling. Wrestling did this correctly. Okay, what they did is they invested their money and their energy into new bands, right? And you had the occasional
Mhm.
old, or sorry, new guys, and then you had the occasional old guy that came out for, like, summer, whatever it is. Is it SummerSlam or whatever? But they bring out like an
Yeah,
older
me.
school wrestler, but they
Sure.
weren't focusing their energy on old wrestlers only. This business is only focused on old bands, nostalgia,
Well,
because they do not want to take the risk for some reason in pushing the new
well,
bands out.
we
Right,
just kind of went over the reasons. That's the that's what,
right,
basically what it comes down to, right?
right.
They're a safe bet. They've got an audience. There's no division when it comes to politics with the old nostalgic bands. That's where the divide is with just the old, like I said, the nostalgic bands and the modern bands from the last 20 plus years or so is what we've been talking about really since social media. Everything is I mean, like, just a couple of the things he puts in here. One of the things he says is it's an aggravating industry and minimizing it is very important. See, and again, so we're taking, yeah, I mean, anyone who's worked in it knows it's an aggravating industry, 1,000%. And do we want to minimize it? Sure, but again, what's the goal here? Is it to make money for the bands and for the label and whatever it is you're doing, the PR, the publicist, or whatever? Or is it just minimizing, everything, risk, minimizing, getting into disagreements with people online? I mean, again, it's anything in business is supposed to be difficult, and I'm not like, you've had a business, I've had business. I mean, we know, everybody knows this. I mean, we've all sold things. You as a band, that was your business. Okay, I ran a label. Well, I mean, everyone's done stuff, so it's like I totally get it, but you just know that comes with it. Of course, it's aggravating, and you want to minimize it, but that shouldn't be sacrificing the art in order to minimize, an aggravation. You know what I mean? Because again, who loses out? The customer, and that is who you're trying to placate to. That's who you're trying to service.
Well,
Is the
not only
customers buying the product?
not only that, but you're also influencing the culture that's surrounding it too. The culture,
Absolutely.
the whole picture. Let's go whole picture. Not
Destroying
just
it.
not just
Mhm.
this, the whole picture. Music influences culture. It's part of it, just like the movies and whatever. It's
Totally.
entertainment. It's all part of the
Absolutely.
culture. So there is a that's why it's called gate. They're gatekeeping they're trying to gatekeep the culture. When they
Mhm.
make these decisions, as opposed to looking at the bigger picture. They're looking at it with blinders on. They only want this one section to influence the culture aspect. You know what I mean? It's
No,
almost like they're
I
afraid.
1,000%. Well, and I think that's a great point because, I think that's probably that's something that wasn't discussed, but that's exactly it. It goes back to the gatekeeping thing with the culture. Like, it's like you can engage, but again, there are people on there that they are, that's their that seems to be the most important part, right? That's why you have a lot of the cancel culture. And we'll talk about it for a minute. We just saw that happen to Larry Howe from Vicious Rumors. And this is a guy who's an original member of the band. Okay, put out reposted some memes or whatever. They initially kicked him out back in February, Vicious Rumors, because he had shows canceled. But he rejoined and they patched things up. And they decided, I give Jeff Thorpe credit. He's just very neutral. He doesn't take a political side, which is what you really have to do these days. You just have to do that as a band if you want to survive. You got to not take a side, or there is a side you could take and you'll be pretty safe. But one side we know you can't. But the safe bet is just don't take a side, stay neutral. Don't even mention politics on your social media pages or anything, especially on band. But obviously, they decided they were going to work it out. They had a good U.S. tour. Guess it went really well. Like I said, guy's been with them since '85 with the band, and all of a sudden, because he says very. I mean, I looked at his page. I mean, I guess he scraped everything off. So again, he apologized as well. He did apologize if he offended anyone. Did the whole thing. So he put the music and the fans above his personal beliefs. Because my thing is like, look, if someone comes out and they apologize and they say, I'm not going to do certain things anymore else. I didn't. Yeah, I think everybody deserves to, have a second chance in that regard. But he did that, but no second chance. The European shows canceled, and now he quit the band because he doesn't want to put the other guys through all the crap. So again, you're right. It's through these, the engaging in the community, right? Between that, okay, and between making, the risk and everything you put into this scene about yourself and not about the music and not about actually making money and not worrying about politics and everything just in order to make money or worrying about if someone's going to make you look bad or if they're cool or not. That it's like you said, it's with all that, what they're doing is controlling the culture, like you said, of and that's where the gatekeeping comes in when you're controlling the culture of what's going on in the scene and who you're allowing in, right? And then so when you see this person at a show, okay, oh, that's so and so that did blah 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 blah. You want to, and these are the type of people that don't want them there. Instead of just going like, oh, there's that guy I don't like, or that girl I don't like, that woman I don't like. Yeah, let's just go over here. I don't want to talk to that person. It's more like, no, I want to make sure I can just destroy them online so that they never show up here again.
Yeah, and that's not what a community actually is.
No, it's not. As we know, that's a club, that's a cult, whatever you want to call it. Another thing, artist development, because we talked about that for a minute before. He says again, it now it no longer. I mean, we know it no longer revolves around, the talent, the God given talent of that artist, right, of that musician, right. He says, Matt, that it's really more about how well you're put together professionally.
Hmm.
Okay, so I mean, uh, now again, music secondary. Now we've seen over the years a reason why you had A&R people, okay, was to keep those musicians sort of in line, to because they were a lot of them were, hooked on drugs or they're just a lot of crazy people, right? A lot of them had a lot of issues, mental health issues, what you have you, but they made great music. So you dealt with it. You had an A&R person or you had a manager, whoever that would actually kind of like, be their right hand person or whatever, take care of a lot of their junk. I mean, how many stories we heard about Motley Crue, right? We heard about Motley Crue destroying, I mean, just doing everything overseas, taking drugs with them, getting I mean, that manager, that Doc McGee guy, says all the time. I mean, how much stuff he had to clean up with those guys. But again, because they were making them money, right? They had people in place to deal with these kind of things as long as they're out there touring and continue to bring in the money. Now, that might seem like, well, you're doing it for the money, blah blah blah. No, look, that's just the nature of the business. That's the way it was. So how many great musicians do we know of over the years that were well put together? I mean, think about some of them. Jimi Hendrix, Eddie Van Halen. Were those two well put together? No, they were not. They were not. The great musicians wrote great music. Sure, they can get in the studio, know what they were doing, but they both had substance issues, personal issues, issues with their bandmates. I mean, being put. I mean, that's again. Listen, a lot of that stuff would enhance creativity. Their issues, them not being well put together. It's actually better for their art. A lot of times, if you're well put together, your art's going to suffer because you're too focused on all the other stuff. You want them to focus on the art. That's the whole point. So therefore, again, art suffers. Music again is secondary, even third.
Well, right. And how many of those managers, kind of took advantage of their own artists though, and like screwed them over money while the artist focused on the art and getting, messed
Yeah,
up, or all the women or all the distractions that come with it.
sure.
How many of
Again,
the
but that's the art, and a lot of artists were okay with it though, right? Because they're like, well, they knew it. They were fine
right.
with it. They're like, I know I'm a screw up, but I can write songs. So let me do my thing. I know you could probably get to screw me over. And there were exactly how many hands in the cookie jar that were trying to, I
Well,
mean,
and
you see
and
it with even,
all and all you had was the music. The consumer only had that record. they didn't
Mhm.
have all this extra stuff that they knew now about the said artist, because now that comes
Mhm.
into focus. You only had one aspect. Now you have two. You have the social media aspect, and then now you have the records, and now you can learn all about those guys, and you can now make the determination of whether you want to support that artist, and obviously, with physical media being, astronomically expensive, we kind of have
Mhm.
to make our choices, make better choices in terms of what we're spending our money on. And that comes
Mhm.
into a play as well. It's like, do I want to support now this artist that like maybe I don't quote unquote agree with, but they make good music, or I
Mhm.
don't know. So I know that comes into play as well in 2026.
Totally. Absolutely. And just to sum it up, a couple more points here. He says again, it's all about engaging with the community. But as we've been saying, man, it's not a community, okay? If you're only if it's not a community when there's only one set of beliefs or what have you that are allowed in, to be allowed to be expressed, right? I mean, if like we said, you can't engage. We as we both agree, it's a club, and you can't engage with a club unless you're invited into it, right? You can't just join without being invited and accepted, right? So you have to be socially accepted, okay? Because it's not like these people are getting welcomed in because of their music, all right? It's because of other factors, right? So you have to be socially accepted in order to even be considered. For example, he talks about in a way, he's talking about festivals at one point. If you want to play a festival, it's all about, well, again, right? If they're not going to invite, no matter how good your music is. It's like, well, this guy doesn't seem so nice, so you know what? I'd rather have this other band than this. And this explains for not by a lot of festivals aren't that good because it's a whole bunch of friends just doing their thing together. The fragmentations, again, there's no room for difference of opinion or just outside whatever voices or what have you within a club. A club is just that, right? And that's why this is not a community, it's a club. Like they said, they'll take a lesser band musically because they're engaged more, he says, okay, rather than the better band musically. Another problem again. So it's not about your music being better, it's just because you're better online with typing and engaging. I mean, right there, dude. That says it all.
It's why
That
we're in
says it
the
all.
the the culture that we're in right now. Imagine if it was the
Exactly.
other way.
I
Imagine if we
mean,
only had killer bands of like writing great music.
I know, man. I mean, we're never going to see music again the way it once was, as long as these things that we've been talking about are the parameters for success. That these, labels, publications, influencers, what have you, podcasters are setting. Because what's the one common thing we're noticing through this whole discussion? The
Nobody has
music is secondary, is
yeah.
what it is. It
I was
does
al
not come first.
I was almost gonna say nobody has God in their life anymore. That's in terms
Well,
of that
that's more of a yeah, that's a whole different,
w w
discussion at that, you know what I mean? But,
right, right.
you
What
know.
what I guess what I'm trying to say is, these people are almost like installed in these positions, and it's really weird. That's what I was
Well
starting to notice during that interview, is how these people are like installed because of their
well
beliefs.
well, yeah, well, again, and that's what Matt was basically explaining. He's explaining to you how it works, how the structure, how almost the chain of command, social power structure, whatever you wanna call it within the scene and industry, how it works. You can't just be somebody who has great intentions going in and saying, "I wanna help these bands." I mean, look, not that that's ever been I tried doing that with labels back in the day too, and yes, it's look, it's the same thing. You had to basically those label owners or the guys running the labels and so forth. Yeah, they had to obviously like you and feel you out for a little bit before they, were going to give you a prominent position within the company because there wasn't that many to begin with, right? And there are a lot of people that want to work in it. There wasn't like there was no demand for it. There was a high demand. A lot of people did, internships and stuff. So everybody wanted to work at like Roadrunner and so forth. So it again, that's a little different because that's a business. So if you're running a business, you're hiring people and paying them, yeah, absolutely. But when you're developing talent, that's a whole different thing because you're looking at it more as a business, but you can't run as a business until you have that product that you know people are going to want to buy and then it's going to sell. And then you hire the people to help you sell those products. But yeah, as we see, it's just, just another thing. He says you have to be a strict utilitarian. All right.
Hmm.
Well, for example, you could be accused of so many things, like he was saying. One of the things he said is like, for instance, favoritism, right? Why did this band get to play over this one? I've heard this through, guys in the heavy rock scene who obviously run the bigger festivals there. And, they talked about how, that's definitely one of those things where it's like, again, people think it's the other thing too I've seen online with these communities, people engage, they get involved, right? They think I'm doing the right thing. I'm liking everybody's thing and I'm commenting and everyone's kind of knowing me and here's my band. Everyone says it's good. It did well on the Doom charts, blah blah blah. And then it comes to a festival and then there's only so many bands these festival guys can put on a festival. And again, they've got to put bands on that are what? Going to help them sell tickets. And then some of these bands get hurt. They didn't get invited. They take it personally. Oh, you didn't like my album. You didn't rate my album high enough. You rated that guy in the top 10 and I'm only 15. This is the crap that's really destroying the scene, man. It has destroyed it, I should say, because it's just it is, pretty much. I mean, with this kind of structure, this is no structure that's built for success. There might be a couple here and there bands that kind of are able to branch off, sign with bigger labels due to either being engaging and having the talent. But that's, I mean, the ratio of that and you know, the success rate of that is very, very low, man.
Yeah,
It, you know,
absolutely. It's a great point, and it's kind of frustrating coming from a band perspective who put in so much time to write to their main focus. My main focus was to write great songs, and to have this other aspect of, oh, it's not about how good your song is anymore. It's about what you believe and what you stand for. Are you going to push the agenda? Are you going to make us look good? It's
yeah.
it's everything. Like you said, going back to the original point that you made, it's everything else first, music last.
Well, it is, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, where it's backwards because music needs to be first. Everything else is ancillary. Everything else is just it revolves. It's like having just a circle. That's music, and everything all the other stuff revolves around it. Of course, there's so many components to it, but for the main component to really be social acceptance is like the number one thing. Whether it's a band or if you're entering the business in any capacity, it's like you have to come in and we have to accept you socially through not even in person, right? This has to be done through online, through social media, in order for you to really be able to get somewhere. A band or, like I said, anybody working in it. It's absolute, and like I said, this is what was so great about this, this episode that you did with Matt was because he's 1,000%, I mean, laid it out. I mean, right there. Right. And it's still that way today, 5 years later. There's nothing has changed.
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
and
there's been,
the
mhm,
industry isn't honest, so you're not going to have an honest representation of music. Pretty much, you're not going to have an
mhm,
honest interpretation or representation of whatever art form that is. It's not
mhm.
built on honesty.
No, and if you're someone who doesn't align with the same type of thinking, as these clubs, communities, whatever you want to call them, you can sit there and go, well, I'll start my own. Well, good luck because you still can't. Because I mean, we know. Listen, let's just take. I mean, if you look at all, we've been talking about this for years, on our other podcasts about the journalism. Okay, you look at. I mean, there hasn't been any. If you're looking at metal and rock, I mean, I don't. There hasn't. It's not like there's any new publications out there, right? In all these years, it's still the same because They're aligned with the agenda. The media companies, YouTube, Google, whatever have you, is in line with them. So they're going to push them algorithm wise. They're going to get that up there. Guys like us who are, we think differently and we don't check off all the boxes, and we're not agenda driven. And we're going to talk about, stuff like this. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're not going to get anywhere with it. It's definitely a sort of, you know, what's the we have our own underground going on with our stuff, whatever we're doing. And that's what's sad is there's no equal, I mean, you literally have to go alone to get along if you want to survive or even just, be involved. And as we've been talking about with our last episode, we talked about a guy like Nate from Spirit Adrift, and what you did with Drost. It's like, no, I mean, a lot of, people have values, they have morals, and they have their dignity and they have integrity. And they're not going to, if it means they got to stop like you did and like Nate's doing, they're going to do it.
Yeah,
And that's sad because you lose out. We lose out on quality musicians like you guys. That's what sucks.
I appreciate that. And, my firm belief is the truth will set you free. That's it. Like the truth will always set you free. And in the grand scheme of things, it'll always be like that.
Well, sure. In your personal life, absolutely. Like you said, because there's more important things. And that's, again, that's what's happening,
That's right.
because there are more important things in life. People are like, well, I'm not going to, like you said, like Matt was talking about. Yeah, it's very expensive to get involved in the business these days, right? So,
well, not only that,
why
but
you
your
get
time, dude. Your time is the most valuable commodity you have in
absolutely,
life,
exactly,
period. So if you're, I wouldn't even
totally,
say, I'm not gonna try and like sugarcoat it. I'm not, and maybe this is the wrong term, but if you wasted or feel like you wasted years of your life trying to better this culture or community, in the grand scheme of things, it's sadly it doesn't last because nothing lasts anyway. So,
sure.
what's more important, your time or is the music that you're not going to be able to change, for the better. And once you realize that, it's like, yeah, my time's more valuable.
Well, yeah. Well, with people who value other things in life than music, if they value family, like you said, they value God, they value other things as much as they love music. I mean, we've both spent our whole lives in music since our teens. Whether it's playing music, writing songs, recording music, working in the business in all different areas that we both of us have done. I mean, like I said, it's time. It's time. It's money. Why do this if, for one, no one's going to know I'm doing it because these communities aren't accepting me, these clubs, because I'm not engaging or being a cool enough person online. So therefore, even though I did something cool, and we did something cool, we both have with our films, promoting all these different people and bands and so forth. And listen, let's look at lifers. I mean, listen, I wouldn't say it was really a conscious decision, but we knew we had, bands and, artists that were on both sides of the aisle in terms of their beliefs, and some that were just right in the middle that don't get involved with that. I thought it was a great blend. Like I said, I don't even think we really purposely did it, but when we definitely had noticed it and talked about it and said, this is a great thing. I mean, people should, I'm sure, welcome this, but unfortunately, we didn't, because I guess not all our guys were cool online, I guess, huh?
Yeah,
Or
and the
just, I mean,
people,
it's just so silly, man. It's really
well,
sad. Really
and
sad.
the gatekeepers know that we get discouraged, with like, and they know that our time is so valuable, and yet they it's almost like they do it on purpose because they know they're going to quote unquote win in the end because they're in those positions of power, and they know that people are going to get disheartened or discouraged and then eventually go away. The
Yeah,
good ones
it's
that want
true.
to better the actual
They'll play
community,
along.
not the
Yeah.
club, but the actual community. They
Hmm.
know that they will eventually go away because it's kind of really discouraging to put in so much time and effort, and then
Yeah.
you know you move on to like bigger and better things because you realize, like you said, man, like time
It's
is
a
the
waste
most
of time.
yeah, and
Yep.
that's the
It's
most
wasted.
valuable commodity in life is time.
I know, and it's a waste, and it's just, again, just to wrap it up here, man. It's. And I hate doing like doom and gloom type of episodes, all the time, but it really is, man. I mean, it just this was very interesting. Like I said, hearing that interview from 5 years ago, all that stuff Matt was saying, and just to see that it's exactly the same, that is what's very discouraging. I mean, we've been saying doom and gloom for a long time, but it's discouraging. And again, and it's another just quickly, it's another reason, like you were talking about before, it's why nostalgia is what it is, and why it reigns over the music business. Because all this is doing is hurting the future of rock and metal. Okay, it's like I said, me and you, we've got plenty to keep us listening to for the rest of our lives. We don't go out, or, we're not involved in, like I said, it's not our social life going to shows like like it used to be. Okay, I'm 50 years old, family. You're late 30s now. You got a career. This isn't, it's a lot different, and so it doesn't really, like I said, I've been loving going to these record stores and being nostalgic and collecting these old records and talking to people about it. Hey, I'm getting my music fixed that way now. I really am. I mean, I would love it to be the old way where I could, go to a local, show and meet people and everyone's cool with each other. But the first thing you think of when you go there, like I said, is just like, well, people are going to look at you and right away they just want to know where you at, belief wise. Not about like you've got that shirt of that band on that I love. That stuff it doesn't really matter anymore, and
No,
that's what's sad, man.
it is, man.
Unfortunately, but
It is, man,
yeah,
and but you're doing a great job. I always, appreciate, what you do for the actual community, giving people a voice, all aspects, all walks of life, depending, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle that they're on. You always are about the music first and foremost. You've been like that your whole career, and it's just great that you're continuing to do that. And you are making a difference in some sort of way, and I hope you just continue to do that. And I'm so honored to be here and just to be a part of this. So thank you so much, Matt, for having me. I really do appreciate it.
yeah. Of course, anytime, Tanner, we'll definitely have you back on. Of course, to talk more debating or just having discussions here of these musical truths and the history, obviously, of rock and metal. And yeah, appreciate you coming on, Tanner. To everyone else out there, please, once again, go ahead, subscribe, YouTube, all the social media channels we're on as well, TikTok, all that good nonsense. I got to get more engaged and be more cool. I guess that's what I got to start doing.
You got to be
But no,
funny.
I mean, and just I'm funny, I should say. You're right, not cool. I think I'm cool enough. I just got to get more funny. But no, and again, yeah, that was. I just want to say, I'm going to attach the interview link that you did with Matt here. And again, This is. I hope no one takes this as bagging on Matt at all. Not at all. He actually. I'm very grateful for that interview he did with you because you really laid it out. I mean, clear as day of just what the reality is. And he admitted, like I said, a couple of times about like he knows it's either selfish or it's not right or whatever it is, but he's basically just saying like, look, this is just it's the way it is, and there's nothing we can do about it until only thing we can do about it is do what we're doing right now. And that's it. And just keep it and just continue to enjoy it the best we can. That's really all you can do. But
Yeah.
Matt has some great info in there. So I'm going to attach the link to the description of all the social media pages as well on YouTube, and as well on the YouTube page, excuse me. And yeah, so I encourage everyone to go and check out this interview from about 5 years ago, Tanner and Matt Bacon. It's a great interview, give you a lot of insight on how really fucked up our music industry is, especially the underground industry itself. All right, everyone, we'll see you next time here on Heart of the Matter. Take care.